Hi everybody, Fast Bees. So today, talking about inner covers and which way the notch goes, because it's an ongoing question that seems to stop new beekeepers, and there's lots of thoughts, and then I don't know what it is, but for some reason inner covers confuse all of us beekeepers, or at least most of us. I know it has me before. And so anyway, I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, and there's different thoughts on it, but this is some ideas. Okay, so the inner cover does a few things. One thing, it helps keep the bees calm, helps keep everything confined. You pull the telescope and outer cover off, they're not flying up in your face. I mean, they can come out this hole. And some beekeepers screen this over, but normally I don't have trouble with that. So one thing it does kind of keeps things confined and helps the bees feel at ease. Another thing it does is it helps ventilate the hive, especially in summer. In summer and winter, but especially in summer, you need the ventilation and to let the moisture out. But especially the ventilation in summer. And you don't want so much ventilation in the winter, but you still want the moisture to come out. So the ideal is, and people say, I don't know if there's really one definitive answer, okay, but I'll just share with you a few things. So what most people believe is that you put the notch up, okay, and when you put your, and I don't have one, but when you put your outer cover on, you slide it forward from the back to open this up. So your brood nest is where most of your bees are going to be, in the center. And that's basically what this hole is for. So the heat and the moisture comes up, hits the outer cover. It's kind of like an attic space. It lets the air come through and out, along with the moisture. Some people say, okay, so the teaching is put the notch up for summer to get more ventilation and let some moisture out. And then in the winter, you flip it and put your notch down, and that way the moisture, you're not getting quite the ventilation because you don't want quite the ventilation, but you're still letting the moisture out. Okay, so before it collects onto the bottom and drips on the bees, it can let it out. Okay, so the basic teaching is, in the summertime, you flip it with the notch up, and you bump your hive cover tight to the back to allow some room here, and the bees can use it for additional entrance also. And then in the winter, you flip it over. Okay, that way the airflow basically stays to the front, the moisture comes out the hole, and what does drip drips out the front wall, out the entrance, because the hive's tilted. Okay, there's another teaching that in the summertime, you put it to the back, put the notch up, you bump it tight so that you have an air gap between your notch and inner cover. The bees can come in through the back, you can vent, and the airflow comes up and out the hive better. And then in the winter, you flip it over with the notch down towards the front of the hive so that you don't have quite the ventilation, but you still have some ventilation and you can let the moisture out. To be honest, I don't know which answer is actually correct scientifically. I will say I haven't seen much difference whether the notch is up, whether the notch is down, or put to the back. Okay, so I'll share some stuff you can do with it though, and my thoughts on it. Okay, so a lot of times what I do, I don't ever put mine to the back. That's just me. I usually go the opposite way. I usually put it how most would for wintertime, with the notch down. And the reason I do this is because if I feed a pollen patty, it has more room. Okay, you can see the bee space this way with the notch down, and you can see it with the notch up. So I actually do it backwards so I have more space between the frames and the inner cover so that I can feed patties. And it can still be a little messy if you get carried away. Okay, but I don't really have no trouble with my notch down. Basically, it's not really something I think about. I just flip it where I got room. And I think personally, it maybe not vent as well this way, but it does give more room, and I think the bees can ventilate better that way, you know. So that's just my thoughts on it. One problem with this method is the bees will propilize because the bee space is a little too far. Okay, you can see the propolis on here. And if you have a small hive or a weak hive, this entrance goes straight to your frames. So you might want to duct tape this or something so robber bees can't come in. Okay, another thing you can do is you can put the notch up. You can take a feed bucket, put on it, put in additional super, and then it's contained and you won't have robbing. Now the bees can still get through this notch, but they can't get to the syrup. So if that bothers you, you can block the notch off. Just some ideas people use. Another thing you can do, some people do, I don't care for, they'll screen the hole. That way the bees can't fly up when they change their feeder, especially if you're jar feeding. But just make sure that they can get their tongues through there and drink. I mean, if they're not taking your syrup, that might be why. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, another thing you can do, you can use your inner cover as a bee escape. So your honey supers are full of honey, full of bees. You want to get the bees out so you can get the honey without all the bees. So they sell a little factory bee escape, snaps in here. You put this on, put your supers back on. Bees can't get back to the hive, so they go out the notch. Okay, something you can do at home, do it yourself. A piece of screen, set it on there, tape it, staple it if you wish. I just tape it, put your supers back on. Bees can't go down, they go out the entrance. So that's the way I see it, and this is a helpful video for Terry, hopefully some ideas about it. And you can also make inner covers with no notch at all. This is an old one, has no notches. But if your bees are bearding because it's very hot, you may want a notch. Depends on your area, depends on how hot it gets, depends on if you got evening shade, depends on a lot. You'll just have to pay attention. So much love, like, subscribe, share this video if I've helped you. Thank y'all, Bass Bees.